It's time to talk about a very serious topic, namely type 1 and type 2 errors. So, when we make a decision to reject the null or not reject the null, we could be making the correct decision. So, for example, and I have a diagram of it here. So, the null hypothesis was true and you did not reject it. That's correct, right? That would be a good thing to do. Or suppose the alternative is actually true in reality and you rejected the null. Well, that's a good decision too, right? Because if the alternative is true and you're rejecting the null, it means you're going with the alternative. But there are a couple of mistakes you can make. As a matter of fact, all four things have to happen in any system, right, where both of these things are possible. When you're rejecting the null or not rejecting the null, you could be making the wrong choice. So, for example, I reject the null hypothesis, but it was actually true and I should have let it stand. That's called a type 1 error. Or I did not reject the null hypothesis, right? I left it standing, but it should have rejected it because the alternative was actually true. That's a type 2 error. Now let's see how this looks for the U.S. criminal legal system. So let's state the null and alternative hypotheses. So we can do this either way. You can either say the null is innocence and the alternative is guilty, or you can reverse that, whichever. So I put in here innocence for the null and the alternative is guilty. Alrighty. So here's reality. So reality is, I'm going to make it blue. Oh, not that shade of blue. No. How about that? They did not do the crime. So the null hypothesis is actually true in reality. A null hypothesis being innocence, and they are actually innocent. They did not do it, right? Are actually innocent, right? And then, which I'm going to leave actually is what I had. They did not do the crime. So they should not do the time. Get it? All right. Then the alternative to that is that they did commit the crime. Now, on the jury can reach one of two verdicts. So they can reject the null hypothesis. They can reject that claim of innocence that you have going on. And they can say, hey, the verdict is guilty. That's down here. The rejection of your innocence. Or they can say, no, I don't believe you. Right? Or excuse me, I believe you that you are innocent and the verdict is not guilty. Okay. Notice we never really say people are innocent in the U.S. We say they're guilty or not guilty. Right? It's sort of like that not accepting thing. We don't ever accept anything. We just believe that they are either there was enough evidence to show they were guilty, or there was not enough evidence to show they were guilty. It doesn't mean that they actually weren't guilty. It just means I couldn't prove it. All right. So they did not do the crime and the verdict is not guilty. That's a correct decision, right? That's a good thing. We want juries to do this, right? So if you didn't do it, we want you to be able to walk free. Then we could, right, also have actually committed the crime and you're found guilty. That's another good thing, right? So if you actually did it, we want to be able to find you guilty. Right? So hypothetically speaking, we would like our system to work on, all legal systems would like to work under these two corners a lot of the time. They want guilty people to be convicted down here, right? I guess I could write that out. This is guilty people are convicted. And then this one, we want to be able to let innocent people go free. So innocent person walks free. Okay, so that's great. That's good stuff. But we could be doing bad stuff. Matter of fact, because you're stat students, you now realize that you automatically will do bad stuff. So you will not ever have it so that these two corners are the only things that happen. You will automatically, because you're making a decision, be doing this one, which is that innocent people are wrongfully convicted. So innocent people are wrongfully convicted. That's a type 1 error in this particular setup. Or I have guilty people are not convicted. Guilty people are not convicted. That's a type 2 error. Both of these are pretty horrendous, right? We generally don't want, a murderer to walk free, bad. But we also don't want somebody who's totally innocent being put behind bars or killed. But realize that in any system, all four of these options are going to happen. So that means that your society, your government, for example, if it has the death penalty, will automatically be putting to death people that are not guilty. As a matter of fact, we know that has happened in the US because several people have been exonerated after the fact. If you're interested in more on that topic, I would recommend, they made a movie called After Innocence, which I'll put up here, After Innocence. You can find it online. You can find it in all sorts of places. And there's several documentaries about this kind of stuff. The Innocence Project. It's a group of people that are donating their time and money and resources to get convicted people exonerated for crimes that they did not commit. And then the movie After Innocence is just heartbreaking because you get to see a bit of the fight to get them free, but you also see how much the convicts suffer after they've been let go because, for example, on a job application, it doesn't ask whether you were exonerated of a crime. It just asks if you were convicted of a crime, which it puts a lot of people that were exonerated into a pickle because they can't get jobs because people don't want to hire convicts, even though they never did the crime that they were convicted of. So it's a fascinating look and very heartbreaking. And then they're also pushing for laws to go on the books they're already on the books in 22 states where people that are let go after years of being in prison basically are given a stipend for how many years they were in there to compensate for some. The problem is if you're behind prison with no hope of parole or you're put on death row, then they're not going to get you educated, teach you how to read, give you job skills, none of that. You don't get any of that because you're not, as far as they're concerned, you're going to be there forever. So when you get exonerated, you have no skills or background, no earning power or potential. It was all basically taken away by a system that is capable of doing this. And realize that that's always going to be the case. So you're going to have, as long as you have trials and put people away, then this is going to happen. And by the same token, that also means this is going to happen always, no matter what. Right? It's just a question of, do you have enough checks and balances in place to deal with it when both of these things happen? Do you have ways to go after the convicts if they've been let free, that if we're guilty? And do you have steps in place, such as laws, to compensate people that were wrongfully convicted and were put away for 20, 30 years, some of them, even though they did not do the crime? Something to think about. Now, that's a criminal aspect of this. You could do the same thing with all sorts of things. The jury was rigged and you found it was rigged. The jury was not rigged and you found it was not rigged. You said the jury was rigged, but it wasn't. You said the jury was not rigged, but it was, that kind of thing. You could make those same errors. All right, so let's go down here. Since these errors are kind of bad, we want a way to talk about them. And our way of talking about them is a couple things. We want to give them a probability of happening. So alpha, that same alpha that you know and love from chapter 9, yeah? That's the probability of making a type 1 error. Beta, which is this little B with a tail on it, that's the Greek letter beta, B-E-T-A, if you want to spell it. It's the probability of making a type 2 error, okay? We are going to choose alpha before we do our tests. Almost always it will just be given to you. You won't have to worry about it. And we are not going to deal with beta because that gets into something called the power of the test, which at this current time we don't have in the course. It's in section 10.7 if you're interested, or 10.6, one of the two. All right, we need to talk about something for a second. We can never ever make both alpha and beta 0. As a matter of fact, we can't make either one of them 0. We can't make alpha or beta 0. And we certainly can't do it for both, because everybody would like to say, oh, we'll never do this. These people are just heartbreaking. We never want to have that happen. Or this is, terrible. We want to be tough on crime. We don't want people that are guilty walking free, right? Okay, so the problem is that if you want to make alpha 0, what's going to happen? If you try to lower alpha, back up for just a second. One of the reasons you can't do it is because if you could make them zero, that would imply that you're 100% certain. You are 100% positive that the convicted person did it, or the innocent person is walking free, etc. And we can never be 100%, even with DNA testing. DNA testing gets us 99.9%, but that means that 1 in every 1,000 is being wrongfully convicted or something like that. There's some more nuances to DNA testing also that I don't want to get into, like chimerism and stuff like that. But suffice to say, there can be mistakes, there can be errors, there can be, as long as humans are performing this test, as long as humans are the ones that are submitting evidence, then there can be mistakes. It's possible. There was a case in Iowa, I believe, where the police and the DA actually framed the person. They put in that person's DNA, even though they knew that person didn't do the crime, stuff like that. So that can always happen. All right, so if we try to lower alpha to zero, i.e. we're never going to convict an innocent person. We don't want that person showing up on, the latest talk show, just heartbreaking, etc. But what's going to happen if you're never, ever, ever going to convict an innocent person? Which means you want a shadow of a doubt. Like if there's even a remote doubt, even if there's like any doubt whatsoever, like, I don't know, the color of their shirt that day was different, whatever, then we will never convict them. But what's going to mean? That's going to mean automatically that some guilty people are walking free, right? Because if you're never going to convict an innocent person, then basically you're going to let a lot of people go that were guilty. By the same token, if we try to lower beta to zero, and that's what all the politicians always talk about, I'm going to be tough on crime, tough on crime. But being tough on crime automatically means that you're never letting guilty people go free, sure. But that automatically means this is going to happen a lot more. So if you're going to be tough on crime, then a lot of the people that are innocent are going to get put away as well. Right? Alpha grows to too high of a level, right? The probability of doing the other problem, right? So if you try to lower the guilty people walking free problem, then you grow the innocent people being put away problem, and vice versa, right? They're sort of on a teeter-totter together, right? So when one goes up, the other one kind of goes down, and vice versa. Now, neither one of them can ever be made to zero entirely. Neither one of them can ever be made 100. I mean, you're going to be doing a lot of correct decisions a lot of the time, but you're never going to be 100% certain, and so you want to keep that in mind. Neither one of those errors can ever be zero, which automatically means that you are going to, as a society, put away people forever that never did the crime. And by the same token, you're going to let people go free that did commit the crime. That is going to happen, period. Right? There's not much that's sure in statistics. That much is sure. So then the question becomes, do you have things in place to deal with that after the fact? Do you have other laws? They didn't get Al Capone on his, Al Capone was this one right here. They didn't get him eventually on what he was, truly guilty of. They got him on tax fraud, right? So they found another way to get him convicted of something, right? So do you have laws like that in place? Do you have ways to go after that? By the same token, do you have laws in place to save all your DNA evidence, save all your blood evidence? For example, the Republican governor of Illinois at one point in the 2000s put a moratorium on all death penalties in Illinois to make sure that every case was reviewed, that kind of thing. All right, so last but not least, down here, if you have a beta of 0.03 and an alpha of 0.05, that means you're going to be making wrong, in this case, false negatives 0.03 of the time, 3% of the time, and false positives 5% of the time. And this particular one was just on global warming. So there's 171 different tests by scientists. All of them had a 3% chance of a false negative and a 5% chance of a false positive. Let me write that up. Hold on. All right, so that means that the probability of making a type 2 error, which is when it's a false negative. You say it's not significant, but it actually should have been significant. That's a 3%. So how many times do you expect that to happen? It's 3% times 171, which means 5 tests. You expect 5 tests to be false negatives. So they found 4 tests to be negative. Should those be the ones you pay attention to? And no, those are probably false negatives because they're under that 5 threshold. If like 24 of them had shown up negative, that would give us something. That would give us reason to deny global warming. But only 4 of them come up negative. That shouldn't be paid much attention to. That said, most people, you get skeptics on both sides of the aisle that'll cling to the 4 tests that show what they want. So be careful of that. Don't just cherry pick, right? Look for the ones that are the preponderance of evidence. The vast majority are showing something. Pay attention to that, not the other side. All right, we're done with 10.1. See you in 10.2.